Well, the news we have all been waiting for, some maybe dreading, some maybe hoping they would get a particular answer, has come. And Stephon Tuitt has decided to retire from the NFL and end his playing days. So the year plus saga ends. And it ends where we've been for the past year plus, and that's without Stephon Tuitt on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So on this episode of Mic Drop, I'm of course Mike Asti, and I'm going to try to set the record straight on the Stephon Tuitt situation, kind of answer to the reaction of Stephon Tuitt deciding to retire, and that has been all over the place, as you could imagine, and as we expected. But boy, I'm even surprised where some of you go now after learning officially Stephon Tuitt is going to retire, and where the Steelers go from here. Because honestly, they didn't have him last year. Obviously, the run defense took a dip from where it was 2 years ago, 20 something in rank, I believe, or 11th something in rank 2 years ago to 20 something in rank last year. He had some players step up, like Chris Wormley and company, but they're not Stephon Tuitt. And Stephon Tuitt actually had a career high in sacks of 11 his last year of playing football. Obviously, a key member of the defense, only 29 years old, figuring he would have more years to go. Certainly, Cam Hayward still going to have an impact. Stephon Tuitt, even younger, came in even later. You figure he certainly would have more time and maybe even come in fresh after missing last season. But he has decided to retire, so the Steelers will not have him. Do you go somewhere outside? Because they now have $9 million in cap space. Again, Mike Asti, Mic Drop, and it's all about Stephon Tuitt. Had to do one of these because of the Stephon Tuitt news finally happening. Hit that subscribe button, comment, chat along. Certainly can come at me with your thoughts here, but we're going to try to keep it smooth. We're going to try to keep it logical and try to keep it sane. And that's not how it's been off the reaction to Stephon Tuitt deciding to retire from the NFL. So let's start there, obviously. Stephon Tuitt does decide, and he announces Wednesday afternoon, maybe kind of a sleepy Wednesday in the middle of OTAs, that he has decided to officially be done in the NFL. Omar Khan, the new Steelers GM, promoted to that position a week or so ago, officially decides to also release a statement and immediately respond. So they don't let this linger too long. We get it on the locked PR account to the media, but they put this, the Steelers put it out there. They put Stephon Tuitt's statement out there. Omar Khan then officially puts a statement out there representing the Steelers as the GM. And you get some teammates linger. Cam Hayward was the first, of course. Other current and former teammates do make some statements, but of course, that took a while to come out. And Vince Williams actually put it best that, do you guys really love football this much to be this mad at this man? And yeah, unfortunately, there are some Yinzers that do, Vince. But it's out there. It's officially known pretty quickly, but I guess kind of shocking that we'd randomly get this now. But I have been a proponent and I have been firm on this, and some gave me pushback. Some of my colleagues didn't want to go this far. I was saying this months ago, and some were even saying it before that the Steelers need to put a hard deadline on Stephon Tuitt. I get giving him time. I get the physical or emotional issue of a year ago, and that was kind of wishy-washy. We know, obviously, there was a death that was close to him. We know, obviously, it was partly emotional and was not just physical. Maybe some physical was added on. That was the rumor last year. And then, of course, it went on throughout the entire season, and pretty quickly on, you kind of got the feeling, okay, he's not going to be around. Major question mark on this year, of course, and kind of a new era of Steeler football. Omar Khan, the new GM, as I mentioned. Mike Tomlin still the head coach, but Ben Roethlisberger now officially has retired, so he's also gone. You're a couple of years removed now from Pouncey in terms of just major pieces. Joe Hayden, major pieces to the team, major names and faces in recent memory, no longer a part of the fold. Cam Hayward certainly there. You draft rookies who are going to have an impact, Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, etc., regardless of if Pickett starts right away. These are players that are going to be part of the next era of Steelers football, no matter how it turns out. And Stephon Tuitt was still young enough to kind of be that bridge and be a veteran, be a leader, certainly after Cam retires, and be a part of the future, but he had decided to retire. But I said that there had to be a hard deadline. I said it. Some didn't like it. Okay, I get they're patient with him last year. I get they deserve to be patient with him last year. I get it. Granted, there are not too many jobs in the world that will allow you to still get paid. I don't care what happens in terms of death in your family. We've all had loss. You could have the closest person to you. Not many jobs out there, right or wrong, would let you collect that money and sit out a whole year plus and then still allow you to make a decision on when returning. I mean, maybe some would have that. Maybe you're lucky to have that. I don't even know if I would have that. I mean, that's a pretty nice situation. And obviously the Steelers are all class, and they did things similar with, say, Ryan Shazier after his career-ending injury. They let him stay a part of the fold for health insurance purposes for a year plus. I get it. So they did the right thing by Stephon Tuitt. There's no way he can be mad at the Steelers, or any defenders of his can be mad at the Steelers. They did the right thing by him. But I did also say they had to have a hard deadline. You can't just let this linger into camp again, go into weeks 1 or 2, still have no decision from him. Maybe you're losing and you want him back, so you're going to wait and see. Maybe teammates are still obviously going to defend him and they're going to want him back. Obviously, Cam, the leader, said that he was all about him, thought he was going to play, wanted him to come back, but respects the decision. Of course, what else is he going to say? But you just can't have all that. You can't have all of us asking questions, people there every day asking questions about, what do you know about Stephon Tuitt? Is he going to play? Do you want him back? Do you think he would fit in? Is he going to help you? Should they go after him? Should you bring him in, even though now you're in the middle of a season? He missed camp. What should they do? Should they bring him in? It's week 1 or 2. What should they do? Should he come in? What do you want to see from him? Etc. You don't want any of that. You don't want any of that. And you go through the draft. Okay. I would have liked this deadline to be a month or so ago. Maybe they could have done some things, honestly, with this money. But before camp had to be for sure. It's the middle of OTAs. That even makes sense, honestly. You get kind of some of these situations going on, OTAs, etc. Then there's a break and people go on vacation, and that's kind of a lull. Then you get to camp. Obviously, then the preseason and the regular season. So this makes sense. And he finally does announce his retirement officially. And then you get the official statements from the Steelers and get all the reaction, and it goes all different kinds of ways. But I did say they had to have a hard deadline. Some gave me pushback on that. Some didn't like that. Some thought he should just take all the money, whatever, and just go on. And whenever he's ready, okay, and just sit there and let Stephon Tuitt run the show. I never was in that corner. Okay, it's not fair to the team. They've been good to you. It's not fair to them. You got to give them a notice. You got to let them know what you're thinking. And maybe he has been. Maybe there was a deadline. Maybe it was now. And he came out with that decision. So I'm not going to in any way accuse him of knowing what he was going to do months and months ago, as some are replying to me, and just sitting on it to screw the team. Obviously, that wouldn't be what I would be saying. I highly doubt that would make sense or happened. And obviously, they gave him plenty of time. He then eventually made the decision. He's made it now. But some of you are acting like he owes you, the fan. Some of you are acting like he owes anybody anything. I mean, this is a decision. You're mad at him making the decision, saying, oh, it's going to hurt the team. I'm fine with him taking time, but I wanted him to come back. He got to come back to help the team. He's screwing his brothers. Didn't play last year, not playing this year, ending his career early. He's hurting the team. Got to be a team guy. And, you're under contract. You're getting paid. You got to do it for the team. And I get maybe the thinking of last year, okay, he got paid to not play. And his contract was about rendering services for football, not for doing whatever else. And he didn't, okay, they were good to him. I'm not going to argue over that spilled milk there. But I get maybe being upset. I get it. Okay, he got paid, didn't do anything. I get it. But they were good to him. That's fine. The Steelers made that decision. That's fine. This year, though, it's before OTAs are over. He made the decision. There should have been a deadline. Maybe there was a deadline. He made it. So again, I didn't want this to linger on. I said there had to be a deadline. He didn't play last year. That was fine. They had that in sync, the Steelers and Tuitt. So the Steelers and Tuitt were in agreement about last year. You come this year, it's a new era of Steeler football. There's a deadline. There got to be a deadline. He makes a decision. We're still in the middle of OTAs. It's not like it's too far. It's not into camp and he's making this call, or the season's already started making this call. Then I would certainly feel differently. But you can't force a man to play. Doesn't owe you. Doesn't owe me. Doesn't owe the Steelers to play. If he doesn't want to play, you can't make him. I mean, this whole attitude that he got to play, or he's this turncoat, or he hurt the team, or he's not really a Steeler, or he's not going to be remembered as a great Steeler, or I hate him now, or I'm against him now. Completely asinine, completely ridiculous, completely out of bounds. Okay? He doesn't want to play any longer. It's not best for him mentally or personally or physically or whatever his reasons are. Okay, you read the statement. Didn't go into grave detail, but we all know the personal matter that kind of held him out last year, and it was beyond physical. But whatever reason he wants to have, you can't force someone to play football. Okay, and Andrew Luck, I know some Colts fans are upset with him, and he's a quarterback. He was a top draft pick, but he didn't want to keep on playing. He didn't want to keep getting killed at other things in his life that he wanted to do. He was a very, very smart man. And some people were mad at him. They booed him in his last appearance. That was ridiculous as well. That was asinine as well. You can't force a man to play. Okay. Yeah, you want him to play when he's getting paid. I get maybe the angst from last year. But once we get over last year and now we're in a new year and there's a deadline and he decided not to play any longer, that's it. He's made a decision. You can't force him to play. Okay. He's not going to keep on collecting for years and years and years. It's over. He doesn't want to play any longer. It's not best for him. And if he changes his mind in 2 years, that's again on him if somebody wants to sign him. But you can't force him in. So I do see some in the chat here. Again, Mike Asti, Pittsburgh Sports Live, Steelers Now. Head over to Steelers Now for a full coverage of the Stephon Tuitt news as he does decide to retire from football. That news finally happens. That answer to that question has finally been answered. And of course, comment below this here, and I'll fire back at you here on this video. Okay. Tuitt's time is done. We'll be okay. Nothing to worry about. It's life. That's a mature attitude there. I don't know if his time is done, but he's making the decision for his time to be done. And yeah, you got to move on. The Steelers are going to move on. They're going to respect him, but move on. They already have their 6 guys, Mark. That kind of maybe will segue into the impact on the Steelers on this team and what is next for the team here. Again, any thoughts on that? You can keep them coming because you have that $9 million. Do you go outside? People bringing up Sue, Dominican Sue, maybe a borderline Hall of Fame guy, certainly a former All-Pro, resurrected himself after injuries and after a great early in his career on some bad teams to have great runs, whether it be with the Rams or Bucks. And yeah, he's somebody that certainly is a name, but this is a 35-year-old. So Tuitt was 29. You're looking at Sue at what, 35, mid-30s? His best days are gone. He might be able to come in and help you a little bit if he does as some spot starts. What kind of money is he going to want off of coming off of solid team success, even though he wasn't necessarily the driving force, but a great player still when used properly. So I'm not going to sit here and say Sue can't have an impact still at his age. He can. He's not the game record that he was 10 years ago on Detroit, but he can still have an impact on a good team used the right way. For sure. And we've seen that on good teams recently. 100%. Again, Rams, Bucks. But 35 years old. That's what some Steelers fans want. That's really a part of what you're building now that really makes sense. I don't know. It depends on what you get for him. Maybe it's not a bad thing. But just speaking on, okay, maybe you go in that direction. Maybe that's the $9 million. That's a thought some have. Other players have been mentioned as well that are outside Pittsburgh and outside the current Steeler culture to bring in. You have some money to play with, but maybe you need that money for other spots. Maybe if you're going to bring somebody in from the outside right now, and we're still before training camp, obviously in the midst of OTAs, maybe you bring somebody in for the secondary. Maybe you bring somebody in for another position, because that money doesn't have to go to replacing the run defense and replacing Tuitt there on the line. That can go to anywhere on the team. You want to utilize it. You don't just want to sit on it, but does it have to be used for, say, a Sue or somebody like that to immediately replace Tuitt at his position, likely able to give you less time because he's older? I don't know. And also, maybe you put that money elsewhere because you have Chris Wormley right now. You have players on this team that have stepped up. And I'm not banking on Chris Wormley and saying he's all of a sudden going to be a Pro Bowler. I don't think he's ever going to be as good as Stephon Tuitt was or was thought to be out of Notre Dame. And then, of course, what he was a couple of years ago. That connection with Cam and company, with Vince Williams and company, that was solid. That's why they're speaking out in his defense right now. Maybe the Steelers didn't get to see enough of that. And that's what the fans are upset about. They didn't get enough of that. But again, Tuitt doesn't want to play. It's his decision. It's a personal decision. You can't hate him for it at this point. He decided now early enough into the unofficial start of summer that it didn't totally screw the team. They do have some time now, certainly before training camp. And when you get officially into summer, finish OTAs, etc. So if you don't go outside for a guy like Sue, a veteran, and I don't know if that's smart money, even though you could have an impact on a good team still, obviously. Maybe if you get something, else, then okay. Maybe if you get him for cheap. But you can use that money elsewhere. And again, a guy like Chris Wormley last year had a very quiet, good season. Look up the numbers. A very quiet, good season. Doesn't get nearly enough credit. I know the run defense wasn't great. Again, I know the team disappointed you and lost right away. And It wasn't nearly what you thought maybe the team would be, even although many of us kind of expected what you saw from that team. I don't think anyone going in should have thought that was a championship team, but the defense gives you sack numbers, etc. Obviously, TJ Watt tying the record, but maybe fool's gold. The national media loves to say the Steelers defense is so great. Really, the numbers don't always show that, and we've seen some really bad games where the run defense got slashed, where the pass defense just got lit up, and the defense was bad overall, and the sacks were there, but it didn't matter. So, yeah, the defense needs to be a lot better. The secondary needs to be a lot better. Maybe that's even more of a problem. Again, maybe that's where the money goes, because maybe somebody like Wormley or somebody else on this team steps up and gives you a little bit more, because they did have a solid season. Even if not to it, maybe you slap that together some other way. Who knows here? I want to go back into the chat. Tuitt is what made that front line stiff and tough. He will be missed. He definitely will be missed. He was looking to bring in another edge rusher. So I don't think the Steelers can ever have enough edge rushers, obviously. TJ Watt can't be the only guy getting sacks, and that was a problem at times last year, that if he didn't get a sack or if he missed a couple games like he did, and you got to figure he's going to miss some time, he's not going to play every game. And yeah, a little aside, that's why that it made him tying the record more impressive than what Strahan did 20 years ago, because he did play less games, even though the NFL schedule had more overall games. But I'll digress on that. Yeah, obviously, having more edge rushers would be a positive. Absolutely. Now, obviously, the Steelers did go defense after the early rounds being offense. So Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, then DeMarvin Leal. DeMarvin Leal, a solid pickup. I think he fits tons. He fits really in. And that could be a guy that was drafted with the idea that Stephon Tuitt would not be around much longer. That could be a Stephon Tuitt type replacement. I'm not saying right away, because he's a rookie, and maybe you give more time to guys like Wormley, who at least played well last year. But DeMarvin Leal could be a guy of the future, could be a guy that also could come in and have some production. Now, without Stephon Tuitt, how do you use him? Maybe is he that replacement? That type of mentality could be there. That was part of the draft. So, yeah, another edge rusher, and not edge rusher, but just in terms of linebackers and part of the defense, Devin Bush is a big deal. Devin Bush is what he does for this team this year is a big deal. He says he's motivated. He says he has his mind right. Obviously, a former top draft pick for the Steelers. They traded up to get in the early portion of the first round a few years ago. Immediately, a really smart guy. I thought he could be the anchor of the defense and be that Ray Lewis force for years to come. Looks like egg on my face, because he was good for a while, had the ACL injury. Obviously, last year looks like a bust. Now, many do say it takes a year plus to really get over that injury and be back to what you were. So maybe that's true. Maybe you could have a bounce back year, but he's a major question mark, and that's why he didn't get a mega deal. So is he going to have an impact? Is he going to have his mind right? Is he going to be tweeting about cats falling off buildings on Twitter, or is he going to be football and only football? Will we see gibberish on there at a Friday night at midnight? Because I did last week from Devin Bush. I don't know if you wanted to see that. Or again, will you see the guy that today told the media, I'm football focused and I'm motivated to prove people wrong? And he does. He has plenty to prove from last year. It was a bad year. It was a bad look, and obviously the injury before. So he needs to do a lot more, or it's a bust from what they did from trading up to get him, even though they loved him out of Michigan. So again, that would obviously help the linebacker group, and that's a big deal. But Stephon Tuitt's going to be missed, obviously. But here's the difference. The only pushback I'll give you, Mark, they missed him already. This isn't like this was last year. He wasn't on the team last year. Okay, the Stephon Tuitt didn't play. I mean, being on the roster doesn't matter. He didn't play last year. He wasn't a part of the team last year. They already did go about it without him last year. And yes, the run defense and the defense was worse than the year before, in particular the run defense, which is Stephon Tuitt's specialty. I get it. They already have missed him. They've been missing him. So that's not an argument. That's a fact. The Steelers do miss Stephon Tuitt and have been missing Stephon Tuitt. But again, you can't make a guy play if he doesn't want to. And if he says it's the best decision for him to not play, you got to respect that, and that's on him. Where do they go, though? Do they go outside? Do they stay in-house? Does somebody like Wormley step up? Do they bring in Sue? Do they do something else? Do they use that money for another piece of the team and part of the team, say secondary somewhere else? That's a conversation. That's where the conversation has to go right now after people start, sanely reacting to this news. And I just knew it was going to run amok. And unfortunately, that has been the case after Stephon Tuitt officially announces he is retiring from the NFL. DeMarvin Leal going to step up, Rashid? Yeah, that's what I've been touching on. And that was part of the draft thinking of bringing in DeMarvin Leal. Okay, you maybe don't have Tuitt, even if you do, he's 29, but you maybe don't have Tuitt any longer. You didn't just have Tuitt. And DeMarvin Leal or Texas A&M can fit that bill. Now, I don't want to go as wild as maybe you're going there as a fan in the chat and think that right away he's going to come in and have a defensive, rookie of the year type of year and immediately become the new Tuitt. Tuitt's best year did take a few years in. That position sometimes takes you a while to get involved. Cam Hayward's going to mentor you. Cam Hayward's going to be there. He's like a fine wine, gets better with age, but eventually that'll slow down. He will need someone to step up. I get all that. But how much are you really going to rely on DeMarvin Leal to be that guy this coming season? Great pick for the future. I think he will have an impact this year. They will look at him a lot in camp, and Mike Tomlin and company will rely on him some this year, depending on what Wormley and others do this year, because that could easily be a flash in the pan to what Wormley did last year. And it was a good year, but not a great Pro Bowl year. Let's not go nuts. Maybe you think more DeMarvin Leal overall. But again, what do you expect out of him this year? But a great draft pick. That makes tons of sense for the future for the Steelers, especially now without Stephon Tuitt. And I don't know if they knew what was going to be the news at that point. It was likely a protection of themselves. If they did know the news then, maybe they would have told us prior. Maybe that would have looked better before OTAs. Maybe they would have done some things and spent that money earlier. Granted, maybe he wanted them to wait. Maybe he wasn't sure then if he was leaning one way or another. Players like Cam Hayward kind of led us to believe he was coming back on some comments back then during the draft. So again, you don't know where his mind went. Maybe it was a roller coaster. Maybe he'll change his mind a month from now. But as we stand, the Steelers need to operate as they don't have Stephon Tuitt. It was a solid career. It could have been more. It's a what-if story. Could have been more. His best year was 2 years ago. The personal life happens. The physical life happens. Gone last year. Now chooses to retire. It's a sad what-if story, kind of. But you got to do what's best for him, and you got to respect it again as Stephon Tuitt does decide to officially retire. Anything else about where the Steelers are going to put this money, where the Steelers should spend this money? It doesn't have to just immediately be a replacement for Stephon Tuitt, but what should the Steelers do? Where should they spend this money? And any other thoughts on Stephon Tuitt certainly are welcome here. And let's try to keep them sane. Again, it's his decision. You got to respect it. I do get the annoyance of who among us would get paid to not do our job for a full year, but that's a Steelers decision. They tried to be as nice as they could, and they treated him right, and kudos to them for doing so. And he didn't let it linger too long this year. So it's middle of OTAs. It's not training camp. It's not regular season. It's not preseason. It's not an uncertainty going into the season like last year. If that was the case, I would say it was too far. He abused them being so nice, and there needed to be a hard deadline, but maybe there was one. Maybe this was it, because we randomly find out that Stephon Tuitt is retiring, and that is it. And I will even give you some player reactions here. Of course, you've probably already seen these, but Cam Hayward came out immediately. A lot of former teammates. Vince Williams, again, came out immediately in defense here. Cam Hayward, my brother made a decision that was best for him, exclamation point. That starts it off for Cam. That's an Instagram. And his IG handle there is CAMHEY97. So Cam, hey, 97. I got to like it. In support of his brother, and of course he's going to. But that's something to read if you're not sure. Joe Hayden, of course, former teammate of Stephon Tuitt, health and happiness is all he wishes for him. That's what everyone should be saying. Aaron Foster, former Steeler, same thing. Kind of, wanting to care about the man with a care emoji. And there's others, of course. Again, our full coverage, our full reaction, the full reaction, what maybe will happen in the future here, etc. All there on Steelers Now. Miles Jack, somebody that hasn't been brought up that much, but maybe TJ Watt is going to get some edge rushing help. Obviously, he does need more help in terms of it can't all be on him to get those sacks. Maybe he likes it, but it can't all be on him, especially when he misses a few games each season. Maybe Miles Jack will be that guy that can help him as a rusher, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal for the defense, but there obviously are still some holes. Again, as I always do here, a lot of just Steeler fans giving you here we go, etc. here in the chat. But any questions, any comments, anything else here before I close up shop on this live chat edition of Mic Drop here in Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. And of course, comment below as well. I'll come at you even after this live edition of the show and comment back and forth with you. I always do that here for our subscribers. Subscribe. It is free to do so. Thanks to our sponsors throughout the network, and you get notification when any of these shows are released. And out to you on this channel, or you'll get practice clips, or you'll get player interviews, or other content, other video content here, of course, from our myriad of sites throughout the Sports Now network. We don't just cover the Steelers. We obviously have the rest of the region professionally and collegiately on other sites throughout the network, Pittsburgh Sports Now, the Mothership, and beyond. And I'm, of course, involved in touching all of them. And, you know, I guess I'm surprised in a way, just from hearing what other teammates had said. Okay, maybe I thought when you listen to Cam Hayward, etc., that he was maybe leaning towards playing. He had all of last year out. You don't know how a personal event like that, a loss, a tragedy, can affect somebody, though, and clearly affected Stephon Tuitt mightily. So, you know, the 1 second team All-American out of Notre Dame, drafted by the Steelers in 2014, round 2, a lot of hope, and again, had a solid career as a Steeler for the time they did have on the field. And it took him a few years to get going, only the 1 sack his rookie year, despite a lot of games played, getting that full 16. 6.5 after that, 4, 3, 5.5, 3.5, and then 11 in 2020. And of course, the tackles also tick up there. His career high in tackles was 39, and that is the solo tackles in 2015, and then 33 in 2020, 45 overall in 2020, and then 54. So maybe 2015 is his best year. 6.5 sacks, 15 assists, 54 combined tackles. That's only in 14 games, although 2020, 15 games, 45 combined, 33 individual, 12 assists, 11 sacks, though. And that rush is obviously what the Steelers want and what the fans want and what you love to see. And it also helps out TJ Watt there. So a solid career that was only improving and still very young and had plenty of time to get better. But again, a tragedy happens in his personal life. Some physical elements exist as well. He misses last year. He had to not let it linger. They couldn't let him linger on too much longer. They should give him a deadline. I don't know if they did or not. He makes the decision in the middle of OTAs and his career is over. So you respect it, and we'll see. Think Mike Munchak joins the staff before the season to help out the offense. Well, that's obviously a whole different side of the football, a whole different trajectory here from this conversation onto it. But I don't know. I mean, really, I just don't know. I obviously I don't see how that's a bad thing. Obviously, he was an offensive line coach that everybody respected there, and I know as many Steelers fans thought the sky was falling after he did leave, and maybe he was treated poorly, and maybe he should have been given a coach in waiting type of title. But still, we're now a couple of years later, and Mike Tomlin not going anywhere. Obviously, not going to be fired, especially after a playoff appearance or getting close. Just not going to happen. The Steelers don't fire head coaches, so. Want it or not, it's not going to happen. Tomlin's going to be around until he chooses not to be. And maybe Mike Munchak will become that coach in waiting if he does come in, but maybe it's Brian Flores as well, who comes in as a defensive assistant, former head coach with the Dolphins and never should have been fired. Whether it's racist or not, he never should have been fired as he's suing the NFL. But he's now part of the fold, and it's great to have him for the Steelers. Who will be that number 2 if you do bring in Mike Munchak? Now, the offensive line, obviously, last year was really, really, really bad. Question marks about Zach Banner all year and what was going to happen when Chuck's core for. He comes back. Banner is gone. They add some things, but that O-line is still the weakness of this team. And that held Najee back from not even having a better year than he did. He had a great rookie season, but his yards per carry weren't great. There's ways to argue against that year and have it be polarizing, but that's also because the O-line was so bad. Ben wasn't mobile. Ben wasn't going to be mobile. Ben was aging. Ben wasn't good as he used to be, obviously, and that was never going to be more than it was. But the offensive line being so bad only compounded that. It made it harder. Whether it's Mr. Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, you're going to have more of a mobile quarterback this year. It will help out the O-line a little bit. And you do figure another year in, a maturation process. They couldn't be better, couldn't be worse than last year. And that the O-line would be better this year. Like Munchak or not, you would figure it would be better. But he would be a solid addition for sure. Great addition. I don't know, though, if it's going to happen. So I'm going to be honest there, Trevor, on that in terms of the other side of the football. Again, anything else on Tuitt? He does make the decision to retire. That answer finally comes to be. Steeler fans, media, the team, everybody knows it now. And who knows when people knew things, but now the announcement's out there and it's official, middle of OTAs. This is fine timing. They had to put a deadline. We know it now. It doesn't go to camp. It doesn't linger to preseason or regular season like last year. They paid him last year. They treated him right. I get maybe it wouldn't happen at your job or mine, but that's between the Steelers and Tuitt, and they did it for him last year as they have done for others in the past, again, citing how they handled Ryan Shazier. And now everyone needs to respect the decision because, again, if he doesn't want to play, you can't force him. It is a big hit to the team, but they already were hit last year without him in terms of that run defense being much worse last year than the year before. And again, it's going to be harder this coming year without Tuitt, but there's money to spend. There's $9 million now in cap space. They do bring in DeMarvin Leal in the draft. You have Chris Wormley having a year under his belt as a good player off a really solid, underrated season last year. You have others maybe who could step up, and Cam certainly still doing his thing. So in terms of that line, maybe it will be better off this year than last year with or without Tuitt. And there's other issues on the defense. So maybe use that money to go and improve other spots on the defense or anywhere else on the team. And maybe somebody on this team steps up, or maybe you do bring in Sue. And granted, what do you really get out of a 35-year-old Sue? He's long gone from being a great player and the best player in football, or one of, at his position 10 years ago, but can be a contributor and a great player serving a role on a good team. We've certainly seen that in recent years with Sue's Super Bowl appearances, certainly providing that example. But granted, this is not, again, a guy who's going to be a Pro Bowler and going to be dominating for you every single play and be the leader for that line. So is that where you spend the money? Can you get him for even cheaper? Can you get him for a little bit and then sprinkle the money elsewhere? Do you bring somebody else in? What would you have done if you had the money a month or so ago and you knew this decision then? Will always be a what if story, but at least it didn't linger on. And we now know, and you got to respect the decision from Tuitt, who, again, it's his freaking decision. So if he didn't want to play, there's nobody who should be making him or be upset at him for not playing. It's up to him. You're not going to keep a guy under duress, even though you may feel it hurts the team. But again, they didn't have him last year. So yeah, it hurts the team. You'll be missed, but he's been missed. That's nothing new. So again, anything else on the Steelers or Tuitt? Reaction to his announcement, to deciding to retire, to that announcement happening now, or where the Steelers go from here. Again, we've talked Leal, we've talked Chris Wormley, we've talked Sue, we talked issues and parts of this team that need to improve, and we've talked maybe where they go outside the house, outside the team to improve it and use that money, or maybe even guys here that will step up for the Steelers this coming season. But now they have time to figure a lot of that out that they would not have had if Tuitt let this linger on too much into the summer. That then would have been asinine. That then would have been unacceptable. And that then would have been him abusing how nice they were to him last year by, of course, paying him while he wasn't playing. But they did treat him very well. They were classy. We all wish that could happen for us if we deal with a loss like that. But now he's made a decision, so that should be it. Mumcheck, not even a thought in my mind. No sense looking and building for hope in old coaches. Well, I hear that. I mean, he's one of the better O-line coaches in the league. So again, if he comes in, it's for the right money amount. He's fine with the Tomlin-Flores dynamic. He's not looking for something else right away, and he's not rocking the boat in any way. Not saying he was before, but that doesn't happen. Then sure, great. If it fits, fine. But no, you don't need to bank on it. And I do think the offensive line might be the same this coming season with or without Mike Munchak. It doesn't matter. Great coach, but the coach can't play. So it is about the players who, if they're better than last year, it might just be because they were there and they were getting better and going through a bad season, but eventually improved and got better. And they have some pieces they've already added to it. So again, the O-line should be better, and it needs to be, or the offense has no chance, no matter who's the quarterback or what's going on with Najee Harris and company. But it doesn't have much to go in terms of being better. So there's not much more to go. It couldn't be worse than last year, I guess. I'll say bluntly. So if it's not, then obviously it's going to be a real problem for this team. But again, that doesn't need to be where they dip into. They don't need to get into it. Would we trade for the defensive tackle to replace Tuitt? Well, you can use the money right now. So again, you're saving money in cap space. You have the $9 million with Stephon Tuitt deciding to retire. There are players out there that can just be signed. There are other moves that can be made. And do you need to go out of house? Because maybe there's other positions that need help more. And you've have guys step up a little bit last season, even though the overall line was worse. You did draft DeMarvin Leal. Again, is that a necessity? Is that something you do? What are they thinking about in-house or out-of-house to try to replace this for Tuitt? That's really the question right now. And I could see an argument on both sides of things. But this is a team that doesn't conventionally make tons of trades. I mean, they have a little bit here or there in recent memory, of course, trading up to get Devin Bush in the draft. We talked about earlier how he has pressure and has been a little bit of a bust, but could rebound from an injury. Obviously, the Minka trade, which really helped the secondary for a while, but he's now not been able to be as impactful because defenses or offenses are scheming against him personally, but that would have been where they went in the draft anyway. So that I would say worked out and made sense at that time. But that really is the question there. Anyone in mind besides Sue that we touched on earlier for anyone to have? I know, we'll have all of this as well. This is kind of just an instant reaction to this news here, but we're going to have all of this in terms of exact players that maybe otherwise, or what else could happen with the team. We already do have Chris Carter touching on Chris Wormley and company and what the roster itself and players that could step up themselves on this team could offer in Chris Wormley's underrated quality season last year. Why is Kenny's hand size still a problem? Well, Alex, it's not. It never was. It's just not a problem. Kenny's hand size is not a problem. Maybe to you, I don't know where you're reading or hearing or what's going on with you, but I do feel kind of that we, the media, or everyone has kind of collectively let that go. If nationally they're still bringing it up, okay, you roll your eyes and just move on. It never was a big deal. I get if you don't want to have tiny hands and you're trying to be a franchise quarterback, but Joe Burrow's hands aren't that much better. Okay, there have been other quarterbacks that have not had hands that much bigger. Joe Burrow, I believe, 9.5. Kenny Pickett, 8.5, something like that. And it depends on Kenny's hand size measurement, whether it was Pitt measuring it, whether it was the combine measuring it. So who knows if he's getting home cooking for a measurement. But again, Burrow's hands are not that much bigger. Look what he's done in 2 years. Basically, right away, an offensive rookie of the year candidate. Second year, leads a team to the Super Bowl that hasn't been there in 40 years, basically, almost 40. And never won a championship, but he got him as close as possible, really, as you could imagine, before getting it. And one of the better quarterbacks for the future of this league. So again, I get it. I get it. So I get being annoyed by it, but no, Kenny Pickett's hand size, not a big deal. We've seen what Joe Burrow has done. The problem is just a narrative people keep bringing up because they got nothing else to talk about until the season starts. If you're responding to Alex there and Kenny Pickett's hand size, you are correct. That would be a lazy thing to talk about in a lazy narrative. It's stupid. It doesn't stop you from doing anything. If Kenny Pickett doesn't start and it's Mitch Trubisky, it's not because of his hand size. If he doesn't have a great career and becomes a bust, it's not because of his hand size. We've seen players with a little bigger hands, similar hand size, smaller hands have success. That's not going to be a thing. I'm not going to let you guys do that, but yeah, that would be lazy. Dude is going to be just fine. Hands, yeah. So you were talking about the hand for this used to get them through college. He wears the gloves. Maybe that'll be something to discuss. But again, I don't think it's even been a topic, honestly. I don't know what content you're absorbing there, Alex, but feel free here to go Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. And we're not going to be touching on the hand size any more than these 2 or 3 minutes that I had to answer that. Steelers are signing Tuzar Skipper, outside linebacker, Tuzar Skipper. Okay. Again, this is a possibility. I mean, again, you're looking at a player that could be brought in again out of Toledo. So again, we're talking about a linebacker out of the Giants. And I know we talked about edge rushers earlier. So, okay. What do you do in terms of, and I'm sorry here, I'm trying to read the chat because we're getting a lot more action here. Oh, this always happens as I try to end these things. I just get flooded with chat, more so at the end. No problem, Alex, if you're outside the market here, but try to not consume as much national media. And I'm not against anyone there. Obviously, that's the level, when you're a kid. I'm very content with my career and what it's been and what it is. But obviously, you dream of national and maybe you settle somewhere. I get it, but they don't know the team as well as people who cover the team locally. I'll put it to you that way. So anyone talking nationally about hand size for Kenny Pickett, they're being lazy. It's ridiculous. So try to consume local content if you can. Twitter, social media, here, Steelers Now, this channel. No matter where you live, you don't need to be worrying about hand size. You don't need to be consuming content about a hand size. Would you pay Johnson or Minka first? That's a better question because who knows if they're going to bring in our skipper, and that could be an impactful player. That doesn't immediately replace Tuitt, though, obviously. And you have Brandon Miles, Jack, and other linebackers, and Devin Bush has pressure to try to help TJ. So that's a different thing. But you have that money, and I did talk about spreading it elsewhere. Maybe it doesn't have to immediately be a defensive tackle or anyone on the D line. You just use that money to help the defense because maybe someone like Wormley could step up. I probably would pay Minka first. Johnson is just, I mean, Deontay, here's the issue. And I'm not saying I wouldn't pay Deontay Johnson by any means. I'm not saying they're not going to pay him. And quite frankly, I'm not saying that I wouldn't want to pay both of them. Whether it can happen is a different story. Minka Fitzpatrick immediately was an impactful player, immediately creating turnovers and helping the Steelers defense and him create records off of how impactful he was in 2019 after that trade. And that made tons of sense. It's where they were going to go in the draft anyway. He was still so young, a great player at Bama, saw with Miami the brief time that he was there, and then now a Steeler, and obviously has played well. And he's important because other teams scheme against him personally. So even if the numbers don't jump out at you, he's a great player that impacts you. And can you help to deal with a world without him? You would need to replace so much else is already a weakness for you in general in the secondary. Still so young. That would be why you would pay Minka. Why you wouldn't is because the numbers have gone down and because teams are scheming against him. How much can he do? And do you want to spend tons of money on a guy who is hampered and handcuffed by a scheme against him? Okay, to Deontay Johnson. And I did a recent show on how Deontay Johnson skipping OTAs was not a big deal, but there's still tons of pressure on him. And that's really the case. Okay, again, him skipping OTAs, not a big thing. That happens all the time. And maybe this year is a bit funky because you have a new quarterback that's a veteran in Mitch Trubisky. You have a new quarterback that's a rookie in Kenny Pickett. They're competing. Both guys got to get comfortable with you, and you got to get comfortable with them. Regardless who's going to start, it's likely one of the two of them. Mason's still there, but it's not going to be Ben. So it's a new offense. Matt Canada's still there. He had excuses last year. He won't this year. He has pressure to perform as well, and so does this offense. Maybe the O-line will be better, but this may have been an important offseason for you as the number one receiver. You emerge as the wide receiver one last year, and I thought you were that even the year before because of your separation numbers for Deontay Johnson. I get that maybe it was better for him to show up, but he eventually showed up. So that's not a big deal. No one's going to be remembering skipping 1 week of OTAs months from now if he plays well on the field. It's all about the field. But the devil's advocate stance here with Deontay Johnson, why there's tons of pressure. Okay, Juju's gone. You didn't give him big money, and I'm not saying you should have. He's clearly a number 2 or 3. He's not a 1. He's a slot guy, a solid slot guy. Came back for humble pie a year ago. Wasn't going to happen again. So he's gone. He's in Kansas City. James Washington, not utilized enough, but no, you couldn't utilize him much more. What were you going to do? You had a strong depth chart of receivers, but a playmaker when utilized, he's gone. He's in Dallas. That was going to eventually happen, of course. And you're long removed from AB and those guys. So you have a younger group now, receiver. Deontay Johnson is the leader. He emerged as the clear number 1. Chase Claypool had a bad year last year after a solid rookie year, of course, where he also set some records a few games in. He has that beast body, that physical specimen that he is. He could be a number 1 type. I think maybe he fits more into a number 2. Maybe he replaces Juju's type of style. You do get Pat Freiermuth as a tight end who can become even more of a pass catcher for you this year than last year. Was a solid blocker last year as a catcher after just being a pass catcher in college and not really focusing on blocking. He picks that up. Underrated player. I do think he can be one of the better overall tight ends in football, which helps the offense. Najee can be obviously even better, especially with a better O-line, and that can help the offense. And then George Pickens in the draft, Calvin Austin the third in the draft. Calvin Austin, a burner. He can be the new James Washington and give you big plays and maybe even be way better than him at that. But how much will he be used? Is he more than a number 3? No, probably not. George Pickens, though, maybe has that number 1 potential. Big plays at Bama, maybe a little bit of a mental case. That may scare you Steeler fans for obvious reasons, but he is so athletic, so good, so talented, and could step up. So, all that said, Chase Claypool, if he steps up and gets to where he was 2 years ago, if George Pickens has an impact right away and receivers can, Calvin Austin there with big play potential, that pushes Deontay even more. And Deontay became that number 1. He's best at separation on the team. He can give you big plays. He can run the best routes. He's the number 1, clearly. But he has the drop issues. It was really a problem 2 years ago. He worked on it in the offseason, fixed it most of last season, had a Pro Bowl caliber year, but then they reemerged at the end of the year. You can't have the drops keep reemerging and have that be in people's minds at the end of the season as you're the wide receiver one and want the big money. So receiver is a position now that, yeah, some guys have got big money and they always will. Tyreek Hill and company, if your team's not going to give you big money, somebody else will. Miami gave them the money, but the Chiefs are going to be just fine without him. Can be just as good without him as they were with him. Yeah, obviously you'd rather have him. He's the best player on your team, but they're still going to be a contender. Will he with Miami? Likely not. Here's how receivers work, and this is why A.J. Brown and company, these are why these guys were moved in the draft where the team they were originally with didn't want to pay big money and somebody else had to. It's a position that out of the draft, right away as a rookie, you can have an instant impact. Not every position's like that. But unlike, say, running back, that's also like that if you get playing time, you have a long shelf life. It's not 3 or 4 years like a running back that you just get destroyed and beat up, and your O-line really affects how long you play. Najee already getting killed from last year. It's a position that, yeah, you need quarterback help. That's why Diva, T.O., Randy Moss, to get frustrated when the quarterback wasn't as good as them. It's innately a diva position, so that's maybe a defender of George Pickens being a diva. But you can play a long time. You can have an instant impact. And every year there are tons of receivers that are out there in college football that come out in the draft. This was a deep receiver draft. That's why the Steelers picked up 2 of them in the early rounds. And I'm sure next year and the year after that, and obviously Jordan Addison, who we've touched on with our pit coverage and in other shows, and he's now at USC. But after that, he's going to be in the NFL. He would have been in the NFL draft this year if he could have been. He's going to be out there. That's going to be a great receiver for somebody, Blitnikoff winner. So I'm sure he's going to be great at USC, whether you like it or not that he's there. But again, you can find receivers. It's an easy position to replace. You don't need to spend big money on them. There's tons of impact they can have right away, but they also rely on other things to happen to fully perform. It's just a risk to give tons of big money to a receiver. And I think they're going to be cautious of Deontay Johnson because despite clearly being the number one on the Steelers, where does he rank overall in football? Is he a top 10? Is he a top 15? He was mad he wasn't a Pro Bowler initially, then became a Pro Bowler, but where does he rank? The drops hold him back. The numbers can be there, but you fix the drops, then you're even a step above, but they're never completely fixed because they reemerged last year. I'd rather pay Minka probably, and I don't know if they're going to pay Deontay what he wants, but maybe they will. Maybe if George Pickens steps up and has a great rookie year, that's even worse for Deontay Johnson. Tons of pressure on Deontay to perform this year. Forget skipping OTAs, but still pressure on him. And there are 2 Steelers. I'll leave you with this. There are 2 Steelers that have the most pressure on them to perform this coming season, and it is clear. Deontay Johnson, because he wants big money, there always are receivers that can easily be added to a team for a lot less money. You have rookies on this team that can perform and help right now. And the big money the Steelers have spent in recent memory to receivers hasn't really worked out. So they're going to be cautiously waiting and seeing what Deontay gives them and if he totally fixes the drops and really emerges as a one, not only on the Steelers, but in the entire NFL, goes from maybe a top 15 to a top 7 or 8, top 5, really steps up. That will decide the money. But Devin Bush is the other. Obviously, we touched on it earlier. Trade up to get him. Tons of promise right away. Great college career, great rookie season. Seemingly going to fit right in, loves football. Then you get kind of a head case situation on social media. He then gets hurt, a serious injury, an ACL. You need a year plus to recover. He wasn't great last year, even went in there, basically appeared to be playing timid and scared, but still within that period after the ACL injury. So what does he do now a full year plus away? Can he emerge? Can he get better? Can he bounce back? Yes, he can. Does he? Where's his mind, despite what he's saying? Where's his head in terms of his motivation? And if he doesn't, obviously it's not going to happen any longer with the Steelers. Maybe he'll do something somewhere else. They didn't give him the big money and pick it up because of the uncertainty around him, but maybe it's just the injury. Kevin Colbert said it best. He was one player before the ACL, another player after. Where does he finish? Now, a couple years removed from that injury, a very serious one. Athletes do say it takes a year plus to get over it, to be back to form. Can he get there? Pressure on Deontay, pressure on Devin Bush. No longer pressure on Stephon Tuitt, though, as he had made a decision to officially retire from the NFL. They treated him well. They treated him with respect, paying him last year. He also returned the favor and did not let it linger too long. So whether there was a hard deadline or not, he told them early enough in the offseason. They now have the money to replace him they have the money that can be used for other spots on the team if somebody on the team steps up, or to use elsewhere. What do they do there? The defense already played without him last year, so it couldn't get worse, but it needs to get better. They don't get the boost of Tuitt returning, but you respect the decision and move on. It's a personal decision. You can't force the man to play, and he had decided that it's best for him to retire from the NFL. So I'm just going to briefly scan the chat here as you guys were chatting a little bit here as I was closing up the show and kind of giving that final rant and soliloquy there, as I like to call it, and then close up shop here. I wonder if we could use him. Could be effective. Again, I think that's about Minkah. A lot of Minkah here in terms of that question about Minkah or Johnson. Interesting. Yeah, it's the receiver position's rough to get big money right now. You can easily replace it. He has the drops issue. He can spend a lot less and get similar production usually. And George Pickens could immediately step up. What rookies you see making more of an impact this year? Again, I think George Pickens is going to make an instant impact, whether it be Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. I think he really fits with Pickett, by the way, but I do think Mitch Trubisky starts the year as the starter. But either way, George Pickens right away can have an impact. I do think his talent, that athleticism, that ability to run those routes, he will fit in perfectly with either one of those quarterbacks and have an instant impact. I really think Pickens will. Calvin Austin third probably will too, depending on what you really think of you want out of the impact. He was a later round pick and he'll make some big plays, but I think George Pickens is going to be maybe arguably the top player from your draft class. And that's saying a lot with Pickett being a quarterback and the only quarterback taken in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft. But because Pickett, I don't think will start right away and might be hampered by that, I do think there's a strong possibility that George Pickens has the best rookie season and has the largest impact of any Steelers rookie this coming season, even over Pickett, because he's going to play right away and have an impact right away. Pickett may not. And of course, to connect the dots from this Tuitt topic, maybe DeMarvin Leal steps up now and gets that opportunity to step up with others because Tuitt is no longer there. So that'll be it for this edition of the show, as I will drop both mics and officially drop the mic on the Stephon Tuitt conversation. I'm not going to actually pick up these mics and drop them. Don't want to do that. Spent money on these, no matter where the money's coming from. I don't want to do that to the company or myself. So again, I metaphorically dropped the mic hopefully on this topic, and anyone who is trying to run amok with the reaction to Stephon Tuitt deciding to retire. He does decide to retire. What do the Steelers do with that newfound money? How do they improve? Where are they on the field as a rush defense in comparison to last year when they also didn't have him? Does somebody step up on the team again? Do they go elsewhere? Do they spend it elsewhere? And of course, all the other questions about the Steelers offseason, paying Deontay, paying Minkah, who starts at QB, all of those remain to be answered. But we do have now one answer, and that is the Steelers will be without Stephon Tuitt, who decides to retire. Got to wish him well. Got to respect the decision. Another year without Stephon Tuitt and really into perpetuity without Stephon Tuitt. A career cut short. A what-if story. Best year a couple years ago. Solid player. Had an instant impact. Figured was going to be around much longer. Doesn't happen because of personal things. Hopefully, though, this is not a decision that he regrets. And if it's the best decision for him, then, hey, it's the best decision for him. So Stephon Tuitt, congrats on a solid career. Wish you well moving forward. That'll do it for this episode of Mic Drop and my mic drop on the topic of Stephon Tuitt retiring from the Steelers and from the NFL. Also hit us up here on Twitter at PGH Steelers Now, at PGH Sports Live, of course, SteelersNow.com for all of our coverage all off season long and then into the season. And then find me at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter and subscribe. Bottom of this video, comment below if you couldn't chat along here during this live edition of the show, and I will respond to you there in the comment section of this video while it's archived here and on SN as well. So thanks to everybody who chatted along. Respect to his decision. And now other questions that have not yet been answered can get answered, but we do have an answer to that one that Stephon Tuitt has officially decided